Middle East spirals towards wider conflict, there's been a lot of ongoing debate about how the conflict between Israel and Palestine originally came about. Well, one thing that can't be denied is the central role played by the British in the bloody and controversial establishment of the Jewish state. And while Rishi Sunak pulls back on initial calls for a ceasefire in Gaza and rows in full square behind Israel, his Scottish counterpart, on the other hand, has stepped up for Palestine.
How many more children have to die before a ceasefire is called for? We're calling for a ceasefire. I cannot understand Sir Keir Starmer's position. I cannot understand the Prime Minister's position, and I ask them, how many more children have to die before you join us and join many across the world, including the United Nations, and call for that ceasefire?
The British a la carte attitude towards the conflict in Gaza was highlighted as recently as last May by the UN, when they pointed out that British historical responsibility in the region was essentially being ignored, with London failing to engage in the pursuit of a solution to a conflict that, as we'll see, they were deeply complicit in creating.
The responsibility on the UK is higher considering the historical legacy of the UK in the area. The UK doesn't seem to be active on this agenda, such as compliance with international law. It is about time there is a paradigm change towards the question of Palestine.
The United Kingdom bears a moral and historical responsibility towards the Palestinian people. It must be a positive player in realizing the rights of the Palestinian people and finding a political solution that meets their aspirations.
In order to understand the granular nature of British responsibility when it comes to today's bloody war, we need to look back to another period of global instability, the First World War, when British double-dealing during their turf war with the Ottoman Empire led to the now infamous Balfour Declaration, which basically committed Britain to the creation of a Jewish state in Palestine, a move which was to have a devastating consequence for the Palestinian people for decades to come.
His Majesty's government view with favor the establishment in Palestine of a national home for the Jewish people, and will use their best endeavors to facilitate the achievement of this object, it being clearly understood that nothing shall be done which may prejudice the civil and religious rights of existing non-Jewish communities in Palestine, or the rights and political status enjoyed by Jews in any other country.
And unsurprisingly, while making promises to the globally influential Zionists about the creation of their state on Arab lands, the British also strung the Arabs along, promising to also create a state for them, even assuring them that Jewish immigration would also be controlled, suggesting the Arabs would have ultimate control of how large any nation Jewish state would be. The plan, of course, ultimately collapsed into violence and chaos.
Jewish immigration during the next 5 years will be at a rate which, if economic absorptive capacity permits, will bring the Jewish population up to approximately 1/3 of the total population of the country. After the period of 5 years, no further Jewish immigration will be permitted unless the Arabs of Palestine are prepared to acquiesce in it.
Well, what began as a British plan to manipulate Jews and Arabs to their own geopolitical end had become a seemingly intractable conflict, whose architects finally accepted it as such in 1947, when they promptly dumped the entire problem into the lap of the United Nations to sort it out.
It is in these circumstances that we have decided that we are unable to accept the scheme put forward either by the Arabs or by the Jews, or to impose ourselves a solution of our own. We have therefore reached the conclusion that the only course now open to us is to submit the problem to the judgment of the United Nations.
The resulting establishment of the Israeli state in 1948 led to the brutal displacement of hundreds of thousands of Palestinians, the destruction of hundreds of their villages, and the deaths of thousands of innocent men, women, and children. This event, known as the Nakba, or catastrophe by the Palestinians, defined Britain's cynical failure in Israel-Palestine. Well, with the DNA of the British Empire building deeply ingrained in the tragic conflict we see in Gaza today, it seems unlikely the British will be taking any responsibility for their historical role. As far as they're concerned, Palestine's troubled history began on the 7th of October, 2023.